But if I lose my thought because of cell phone rings, I've lost the whole thing. Last summer, I did something really kind of stupid. I answered a call for volunteers from the board and said that I would chair the Ponds and Wetlands Committee. This does not mean that prior chairs were not capable and were not doing a good job. I am by profession an environmental consultant. My background academically is in estuarine ecology. So, as somebody said yesterday, I'm probably the most qualified person that's ever had the stupidity to say he'd serve. The past activities have been conducted on a reactionary and not a proactive basis. The committee that's working with me are trying to work things proactively. We recognize that there's a lot of problems in the community that have not been addressed, and we are attempting to categorize and address them in order of priority. The main priority for us is to reestablish positive water flow throughout the interior of the community and maintain a proactive stance to ensure that houses do not get flooded like recently in the heavy storms in October and February. People in Bethany Loop had the water come out of the ponds up to their back steps. This was primarily caused by 2 plugs in one of the drainage ditches, which are now, we just yesterday released a contract to have those plugs removed. We cannot make everybody happy. We recognize that. We have set up a complaint program where people have the opportunity to fill out a complaint sheet in the mailroom, leave it in the folder in the mailroom, and one of us will pick it up, or you can leave it with Lisa in the office and she will email it to us. We keep a database of the complaints and our being the committee's responses to those complaints. That having been said, we the committee recognize that this is probably going to be a 3 to 5 year process to fix everything. We are starting internal to the community where the homeowners will get the most bang for the buck invested. We will then move to the other wetland areas such as larger 404 protected area along Fred Hudson and McCoy Way. Now, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what wetlands are. So part of today's presentation is to try to describe what wetlands are, and basically in this community there are 2 types of wetlands. Along Salt Pond and Loop Canal we have tidal wetlands, which are lands underwater or adjacent to water that are flooded on a daily tidal cycle or a seasonal tidal cycle, such as the spring tidal cycle that we're going through right now. These types of wetlands you see when you're kayaking or canoeing on the pond, on the main pond, the salt pond, as the marshes that are off to the right of the kayak launching area. These are not the main wetlands that are impacted by this community. They are regulated by the Corps of Engineers under Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act, which is a federal statute that was passed in 1898 and deals with construction of docks, bulkheads, piers, dredging channels, and things like that. More important to us is the 404 wetlands, and this comes about under section 404 of the Clean Water Act. And these wetlands are of various types. They include the ponds. They include some of the wooded swamps adjacent to the ponds. They include the wooded swamp that's along McCoy's Way. They also include a 25-foot buffer from the edge of recognized wetlands, which means if you have a house that backs to a pond, you have to recognize that that pond has a 25-foot buffer that cannot be disturbed without a federal permit. Now, the buffers are extremely important. And wetlands, non-tidal wetlands, 404 wetlands, have four distinct characteristics. Actually, I said four, I meant three distinct characteristics. One, they're flooded on a regular basis, whether by storm or other action. Two, they have recognized hydric soils. That means they're water-bearing, water-impacted, water-retaining type soils. And finally, they have recognized vegetation that is either facultative to the wetland area or obligate to the wetland area. Facultative vegetation is best identified as things like the red maple or swamp maple you see along McCoy's Way and Fred Hudson. They're trees that can live in water and also live without the water. Obligate means just that. The vegetation must have or is obligated to have regular standing water as part of its life cycle. A good example of that are cattails. Everybody knows what cattails look like. They're obligate vegetative wetland plants. Wetlands here are protected three ways. One, by regulation established by the Corps of Engineers and DENREC. Two, by the consent agreement, conservation easement agreement that was agreed to between the developer and DENREC. And three, by the memorandum of agreement that the homeowners association signed when we took over the common areas, which included the conservation easement location. The conservation easement lines are established with concrete markers next to the signs. Not all the signs have concrete markers, but the vast majority do. So if you dig down next to one of the signs, if the sign hadn't been disturbed, you'll find a 4x4 concrete marker with a USGS survey seal on the top. We have an obligation, we being the homeowners association and the Ponds and Wetlands Committee, we have an obligation under the memorandum of agreement to inspect the conservation agreement on an annual basis and submit a report to DENREC saying what violations and what changes should be what violations have occurred and what changes need to be done under the consent agreement. We submitted our annual report last November. That report is on file in the office and maybe on the website, but I'm not sure whether it's on the website or not. The consent agreement and the memorandum of understanding and memorandum of agreement are both on the website. I don't want to browbeat people about what violations are and what risks and penalties are involved. They are substantial. So, I mean, you all have to look at what your situations are and say, have I been doing this incorrectly, and what should I do to correct my actions? We have 2 homeowners who have applied for Section 10 permits. They're bulkhead permits on the main salt pond. This is public record, so I'm not saying anything new or exciting. Those permit applications will trigger inspections by the Corps of Engineers and DENREC of the community. So if somebody in a federal government truck shows up and knocks on your door and asks to walk across your yard, don't tell him to get off your property. Now, I just put the whole first page. And most of the second. One of the other reports that we have to file, actually 2 reports that we have to file on an annual basis. One is a water quality report on the various ponds that are in the community. That water quality report should deal with nitrogen loading and phosphorus loading. They're the 2 water quality parameters that have the most impact detrimentally on our water system. Nitrogen and phosphorus come from fertilizers, from road runoff where you wash your cars, soaps and detergents like that. So if the nitrogen and phosphorus become out of balance with the system, we end up with a detrimental water quality level, which leads to algae blooms. And we all know what we had last summer with algae blooms. Each time we had to treat one of those blooms, it cost the committee, cost you all $1,200. So think in terms of what's it costing me if I misuse materials that then cause problems. The second report that we have to submit to them is a chemical use report. So that every time we apply chemicals for an algae bloom, the contractor has to tell us the quantity, the concentration, and the location of that material, and we have to submit that to DENREC along with our water quality reports, because the conservation easement and the memorandum of agreement both have very specific statements about what chemicals can and can't be used. We're trying to get our hands around all of this. Remember, we just started last July and August. And that's why I'm saying it's a 3 to 5 year project. We have now several ongoing projects. Just so you have some idea of what it is we're doing, and we're not just meeting and conflabbing. There was an emergency tree removal between 605 and 607 Bethany Loop last November, because of storm damaged trees and risk to 2 residents' houses. We have just let a contract for the cleaning of debris that's in that ditch and the relining of that ditch for 10 to 15 feet off of Bethany Loop with stone, so that the energy of water coming from 3 different culverts into that ditch is dissipated and the ditch doesn't erode. Additionally, contract has just been let to remove the plug or plugs that are in the ditch line between the confluence of the ditches behind, the ditch that's next to 14 and the ditch that drains the ponds that are behind Bethany Loop. We have a T confluence A lot of water comes in there and immediately runs into a plug primarily of Phragmites vegetation that's grown up in the ditch. You may have seen walking around there wooden stakes with orange or green paint on them with numbers. And this is by the 15th fairway, if any of golfers. It's 350 feet in various sections of vegetative plugs that are going to be removed so that the water will flow freely from the confluence of 14 Bethany Loop through that ditch, under Bethany Loop at that end, and discharge through the pipe into the pond at 16. That's the way the water's supposed to flow. That's what we're trying to reestablish. Additionally, I will be in the next couple of weeks collecting the water quality samples necessary to meet the spring portion of the semi-annual water quality sampling that we have to do. Once I get those results, I will post them. Now, the ponds that will be sampled are K, H, O, E, and L. There's a map over there, you can see where these ponds are. The aerators and diffusers will be turned back on somewhere around the 1st of May. Maybe sooner if the weather breaks and is warmer and sunnier, but no later than the 1st of May. So you'll start seeing the ponds being circulated again. The area between ponds J and K and that discharge line out to Jeremy's branch is going to be evaluated and scheduled for work in the fall. Probably later fall, once the vegetation's down and crews can get in there to reestablish what is supposed to be the positive drainage in those areas. This will go a long way toward eliminating the algae blooms in those two ponds. Again, it takes time to fix these things. So, just another area that we're going to be evaluating is the culvert under McCoy's Way that drain the 404 wetlands into the channel that's between McCoy's Way and that development, I can never remember what it is, Bethany, whatever. And that swale ditch flows into Jeremy's branch and out into Salt Pond. We're looking at how we can improve the drainage of those two areas so that the McCoy's Way, Fred Hudson 404 area doesn't become a big sump and cause additional problems. Homeowners are encouraged to clear the pipes under their driveways. There are areas where driveways act as check dams during storms. We've seen it, we've all encountered it in different places. Some streets are worse than others. Some driveways, particularly in some of the newer constructions, are constructed at elevations that don't particularly enable the flow unless the pipes are cleared. So please look at your driveway pipes, see if there's grass or sod or sediment buildup, and open up both ends. Maybe run a garden hose through and make sure water will go through. And I actually did better than I thought. I said I'd be about 45 minutes, and I'm only about 30. In closing, basically I want to remind all of you that there is a complaint system. That there is, as it's set up and it works. If you want to mark your complaint form confidential, that's fine. Only basically Tom, Dick Malone, and myself see them. But don't keep it to yourself. If you see a problem, if you have a question, if you have a concern, let us know so we can evaluate it and get back to you. It's not always done as rapidly as people would like, but we don't forget you. We do try to get things done. Help us. Get involved. If you have an idea, if you have a project, if you have something you think you might want to do, let us know. Give us a hand. One of the people at the board meeting yesterday was talking about all the trash that ends up along McCoy Way going out to Fred Hudson. And I said, well, why don't you organize a community cleanup day? And they were like, well, that's a fine idea, maybe we should. They're simple enough things to do. We have an aesthetic issue along Fred Hudson. It doesn't take a lot of people or a lot of sophisticated equipment to go around with trash bags and pick up beer cans and coffee cups. So if somebody wants to do that, please let us know. We have, as is public record, a $65,000 budget. We are the second largest budgeted group, if you will, in the homeowners association. We are only surpassed by salaries and taxes. It's my plan, the committee's plan, to be good stewards of that money and get as much bang for the buck as we can out of it. The two contracts I mentioned earlier, I've actually been in association with Mark and the golf course maintenance people. They're going to do this work as their time allows to fill in on their schedules. What it means to us is that money will come out of my budget, my right pocket, and go into the golf course income pocket, and not leave the community. I get more bang for the buck. Community gets a better balance in their expenditures, and I see no reason, as we've done historically, to have master contracts with outside companies that don't always get us what we want, and certainly don't get us what we pay for. Any questions? Certainly, ma'am.
Is the cost of all this plan, all these plans for 5 years, is that covered in the $65,000 budget, or is there additional cost to the homeowners?
I have an annual budget of $65,000. The line items within the budget are things like ditch clearing, maintenance of ponds, maintenance for algae blooms, chemical testing. These things are within my budget. Now, next fall, there'll be a new budget developed. There are obviously reserve monies for emergency projects like the trees that were falling at 605 and 607. But the plan is to maintain the operations all within the budget. As an example, last fall, that plug work along 15, I took one of our contractors down to, one of our outside contractors down to, and he said, I need all of this removed. He said, okay, fine, I'll send you an contract. He sent me a contract for $35,000. Mark's gonna do it for $3,800. Now, who do you think is looking better? I want to manage our money. I live in this community, I have to pay the dues. I want to manage our money as best I can. committee wants to do that as well.
Question, are the blockages a result of things that the developer did not do properly a long time ago?
No, these are straight vegetative blockages, primarily phragmites and weed trees that have grown up in the ditches that were never removed as part of a normal maintenance cycle over the last 20 years.
So that there will be a normal maintenance.
There's going to be, it has to be a normal maintenance
Okay.
cycle. Yeah.
You were talking about testing for water quality, and it sounded like we were going to do nitrogen and phosphorus. How about just about the quality of the water to maintain the fish and,
Well,
is that another test?
No, we'll start with the nitrogen and the phosphorus. The other tests would not be these are laboratory tests.
Yeah.
I collect water samples and take to the lab in Salisbury. The other tests would be field tests, where I would use a pH meter or a dissolved oxygen meter to ensure that the pH is within the appropriate buffer zone of 5.5 to 7.5, 8, which is normal pH for this kind of area, and the dissolved oxygen is above 4. They're the criteria you need to maintain a healthy fish population. Once we get to that, then I'm going to be asking for volunteers to start meeting with Denrec Fish and Wildlife and organizing a restocking program. We can restock under the CE and the memorandum of agreement. We can restock with certain fish with the permission of Denrec. Well, that's great. I don't know where to get the fish. Denrec does. So, not this summer, but if we get the water quality up to where it needs to be, maybe next summer, we can have a restocking program, particularly with what they call mosquito fish, which are like mummy chugs and minnows that eat the mosquito larvae and help us that way. But you see, it's an ongoing process. It's a longer process than just setting an annual contract year after year after year. We're looking to solve problems long term.
Just, okay.
Good.
Could you just summarize, I know it's published, but the report from December, what were the major problems and what's the feedback you got?
Well, first off, I haven't gotten any feedback from Denrec. The major problems found were encroachment into the CE and the buffer zones by homeowners, doing anything from grading the property all the way down to the water and removing all the vegetation, to mowing the back areas down to the edge of the water, to installing picnic benches and recreational things in there. The big consistent violation is acting like the property between the end of your property line and the edge of the pond is yours. And it really isn't. Your property line ends at a spot. The community association, Salt Pond Homeowners Association, owns the rest of that property. That's deeded to the Salt Pond Homeowners Association. You may have some control over that property, but you don't have a right to exercise grading activities. You don't have a right to use it as a picnic area on a permanent basis. These are, it's not your property, and it's federally and state protected. This is some of the things that are hard because people have not been told this for 20 years. I mean, we have, and I don't know the family, but just past the 11th green, that first house on Bethany Loop has graded the woods away and all the way down to the pond. That's a major violation. Now, I don't know those people, but I'm sure that when the Corps of Engineers or Denrec come in to take a look at the permit applications, they're gonna see it, because you can't drive Bethany Loop without seeing it. And under the memorandum of agreement, it's on the homeowner. The homeowner violates it, and we've reported it in our annual report, it's on the homeowner. I know that's harsh, but it's,
I'm going to get back to the water quality of the
Sure did.
pond. Because of the,
by the way,
You say-
the ditch and the culvert by your house is one of the things I wanted to address in the fall.
okay. But I guess my question was, we talked before about, is there a way to keep the algae down with maybe a natural way by using algae eating fish or carp or whatever they are? And when I saw you restocking, I was hoping you were talking about that, but you're talking about other types of fish.
No, I'm
Is there any
talking about
opportunity-
algae eaters as well.
Oh,
Just in the memorandum of agreement, excuse me, I'm recovering from my grandson's cold. In the memorandum of agreement, it specifies that we don't necessarily have to get Denrick's permission to restock with this particular type of fish. But it says we can restock with fish that would control nuisance environments. So, yeah, somebody, and I don't remember, it was you in one of our tours, was talking about neutered carp that were algae eaters. And we can do that. It's just, we need to do it in coordination with Denrick.
I see. Okay, good.
Over here.
I apologize for coming in late, so I might have missed the gist of some of this conversation, but you may have already addressed this, but the standing water, I hear that you're trying to get that under control. I guess the other concern I have is mosquitoes. Is DENREC working in agreement with our concerns, or is there a sort of a butting of the heads about?
Yesterday's board meeting that came up, and yesterday on 5 o'clock news, there was a story about how Denrick Fish and Wildlife people have already started gearing up for mosquito control for aerial spraying, and that anyone who needs an area sprayed should contact the Fish and Wildlife Bureau of Denrick. Yesterday, I made the mistake of saying that mosquito control was under the Delaware Department of Agriculture, is actually under Denrick Fish and Wildlife. I jump around a lot of different states in my line of work, and I lose track of who does what. But 5 o'clock yesterday on the VOC Fox News, they had lead story.
Oh, so
was
they're addressing it.
the mosquito control for, and they talked about southern Sussex County in the wooded areas, and they're supposed to start the flyovers today.
And that's safe and all that to be out and about?
Yeah,